The coins clattered across the polished wooden floor of the funeral home, their metallic song a discordant note in the otherwise somber atmosphere. 49 cents in total, 9 pennies and 4 dimes, scattered like seeds of disrespect before me.
That's my condolence money. Here, pick it up, you poor thing.
The banker sneered, his polished leather shoes reflecting the harsh fluorescent lights above. Condolence money? This? The absurdity of the moment struck me like a physical blow. There's a limit to how disrespectful someone can be, even on an ordinary day. But today was my father's funeral. The man standing before me, wearing an expensive suit that probably cost more than our monthly mortgage payment, was Ted Parker from First Capital Bank. Same bank where my father had gone to request a loan just weeks before his death. The same bank that had crushed his last hope of saving our family's construction company.
I don't have time to waste,
Parker declared, pushing his wire-rimmed glasses up his nose with one manicured finger.
A prestigious First Capital Bank employee came all the way out here. I'm trying to settle things with this condolence money. You want a loan, don't you? Then get down on your knees and bow to me right here, just like your father did.
He punctuated his words with a harsh laugh that echoed through the quiet funeral home. My hands clenched into fists at my side, knuckles white with restraint. The urge to punch the smirking banker in his perfectly straight teeth was almost overwhelming. Instead, I took 3 measured steps forward until we were face to face, looking directly into his cold gray eyes. I spoke in a voice that was dangerously quiet. Are you sure you want to act this way? You might regret it. Parker's smirk widened to a full grin.
Ha! As if I regret anything. What could I possibly regret when dealing with poor trash like you?
Is that so? I replied, my voice steady despite the rage burning in my chest. That's your answer then. I understand. With those words, something shifted irreversibly between us, though Parker was too blind in his arrogance to notice. But before I can tell you about what happened next, you need to understand how we got here. My name is James Miller, though everyone calls me Jimmy. At 27 years old, I never expected to be standing in a funeral home, facing down a banker who seemed to take perverse pleasure in disrespecting my father's memory. But then again, I never expected a lot of things that happened in the past year. I grew up in a family of carpenters. Our company, Miller & Sons Construction, wasn't just a business. It was my grandfather's legacy. Joseph Miller started with nothing but a toolbox and a dream back in 1962. He built it from the ground up, one project at a time, earning a reputation for quality craftsmanship that brought in sturdy work for decades. My father, Thomas, took over in the late 90s and maintained that same dedication to excellence. Naturally, as the only son, I was expected to be the third-generation owner, but I had different dreams. While my father and grandfather found joy in the smell of fresh-cut lumber and the satisfaction of creating something tangible with their hands, I found my happiness in the digital world. I can still remember the first computer my parents bought me for my 10th birthday. While other kids were outside playing baseball or climbing trees, I was inside, fascinated by the endless possibilities contained within the beige plastic box. I taught myself programming, spent countless hours gaming, and dreamed of a future in technology. The isolation that came with my indoor hobbies left its mark. I became introverted, more comfortable with code than conversation. Physical labor? That wasn't for me. My arms were better suited to typing than carrying lumber. At least, that's what I told myself when I convinced myself that I'm not cut out to be a carpenter. Whether my father was disappointed by my choice, I'll never know. He was a quiet man by nature, not given to long conversations or emotional displays. He never forced the issue of succession, never tried to guilt me into joining the family business. Instead, he just nodded when I announced my plans to major in computer science, helped me move into my college dorm, and wished me luck. After graduating, I'd landed a job at TechSphere Solutions, a growing IT company in the city. It was everything I dreamed of, working with cutting-edge technology, solving complex problems, and best of all, doing it all from the comfort and ergonomic office chair. Every day felt like a victory, a confirmation that I made the right choice in forging my own path. But life has a way of throwing unexpected curveballs. It was Tuesday when everything changed. I remember because I'd taken the day off work to play the latest release of Dragon's Quest Online. I've been looking forward to this game for months, had even pre-ordered the deluxe edition. The graphics were loading on my monitor, the opening cutscene about to begin when my phone rang. The sound startled me. Hardly anyone called me during the day, and those who did knew I was gaming. When I saw my mother's name on the caller ID, something made me pause the game and answer. Jimmy? My mother's voice was shaky, thick with unshed tears. Your father collapsed. Jimmy, please, can you come home? The world seemed to tilt on its axis. My father? Collapsed? It didn't compute. Thomas Miller was a force of nature, a man who could carry 2x4s like they were toothpicks, who worked 14-hour days without complaint. Men like him don't just collapse. But they do. They absolutely do. I barely remember the drive to my parents' house, just 10 minutes from my apartment, but feeling like an eternity. When I arrived, Mom was waiting at the door, her normally neat appearance disheveled, her eyes red from crying. She managed a weak smile when she saw me, a silent reassurance that while things were bad, they weren't catastrophic. Not yet, anyway. She led me to their bedroom, where Dad was propped up against a mountain of pillows. The sight of him there, looking small and pale against the white sheets, sent a shock through my system. This wasn't the father I knew. This wasn't the man who could build a house from foundation to roof, who never seemed to tire or weaken. When he saw me, he slowly struggled to sit up straighter, crossing his legs on the bed to face me. His complexion was ashen, but his eyes, those deep brown eyes that could spot a crooked nail from 20 paces, were clear and focused. Following some deep-seated instinct, I knelt formally before him, just as I had done as a child when receiving his rare but precious words of praise. The room fell silent, heavy with unspoken words and years of quiet distance between us. I opened my mouth to ask about his condition, but before I could speak, my father moved. He leaned forward, placing both weathered hands on his knees, and did something I'd never seen him do before. He bowed his head to me.
"Please,"
he said, his voice rough with emotion.
"You're all I have. Please take over the business."
The sight of my father bowing sent a jolt through my system. This was a man who had taught me that a miller stands tall, that we bow to no one except in genuine respect or deepest necessity. To see him humble himself before me, his son who had walked away from the family legacy, it shattered something inside me. I later learned from Mom that Dad had a reputation in the local construction community. "Your father," she told me while making the tea in the kitchen, her hands trembling slightly as she poured, "once walked away from $1 million contract because the client insisted on using subpar materials. A miller never compromises on quality," he said. "That client came back 6 months later, agreeing to your father's terms." But now here he was, bowing to me, his voice rough with desperation. The weight of his request pressed down on my shoulders like a physical burden. Should I take over? Could I? I love my job at Tech Sphere. Just last week, I've been discussing a potential promotion with my supervisor. The thought of leaving all that behind to run a struggling construction company terrified me. But as I knelt there, watching my father maintain his bow, I realized something. All those years I spent gaming weren't just about entertainment. Every RPG I played had taught me about resource management, strategic thinking, and most importantly, about facing seemingly impossible challenges. Maybe, just maybe, those skills could translate to the real world. "Dad," I said softly, reaching out to touch his shoulder. "Please sit up. Let's talk about this properly." He raised his head, and I saw something I'd never seen before in my father's eyes. Fear. Not for himself, I realized, but for the company, for the employees who depended on it, for the legacy his father had built. "The company, how bad is it?" Dad's shoulders slumped.
$10 million in debt,"
he said quietly. The number hit me like a physical blow. 10 million? This wasn't just bad. That was catastrophic. I heard rumors about the company's financial troubles, but this was beyond anything I'd imagined. "How?" I asked, struggling to keep my voice steady.
"The economy took a downturn,"
he explained, his voice tired.
"Several big clients went bankrupt owing us money. We had to take out loans to keep paying our workers. Then interest rates went up."
He trailed off, running a hand through his graying hair.
"I thought we could weather it. We always had before, but this time..."
I nodded, my mind already racing. 10 million in debt. It seemed insurmountable. But then again, hadn't I faced seemingly impossible boss battles in games? Hadn't I learned that every problem has a solution, if you just look at it from the right angle? "I'll do it," I heard myself say. Dad's head snapped up, his eyes wide with surprise and hope.
"Jimmy, are you sure? The situation, it's not good."
I managed a small smile. "Well, as they say in gaming, the harder the quest, the better the rewards, right?" Dad looked confused by the reference, but the relief on his face was plain to see. He reached out and gripped my shoulder, his calloused hand trembling slightly.
"Son, thank you."
The next few weeks were a crash course in construction management. I took a leave of absence from Tech Sphere, explaining to my bewildered supervisor that I needed help with a family emergency. During the day, I shadowed Dad at the company, trying to absorb decades of knowledge in a matter of weeks. At night, I pored over financial statements and industry reports, treating them like game manuals for the most complex simulation I've ever played. The company's office was a far cry from Tech Sphere's sleek, modern workspace. Located in an industrial park on the outskirts of town, The building was practical rather than pretty, a testament to my grandfather's philosophy that money should go into quality work rather than fancy appearances. The walls were lined with photos of past projects, schools, hospitals, homes, each one representing years of hard work and dedication. But it was the people who really opened my eyes. Mike Thompson, our senior carpenter who'd been with the company for 20 years, took me under his wing. "Your grandfather gave me my first job," he told me one day as we walked through a job site. "I was fresh out of prison. Nobody would touch me. But Joe Miller? He said he didn't even care about my past, only my future." David Chen, our project manager, shared similar stories.
"Your father helped me put my kids through college,"
he said during a lunch break.
"When I needed extra hours, he always found work for me. That's why we're all still here, even with the company struggling. The Millers take care of their people."
Their loyalty was humbling, but also added to the pressure. These weren't just employees, they were family, in every way that mattered. Their livelihoods, their family's well-being, all of it rested on my shoulders now. Surprisingly, my gaming background proved more valuable than anyone could have expected. Years of resource management games had taught me to look at problems systematically. EVE Online's complex economy had given me an insight into market dynamics. Even Team Raids had prepared me for coordinating groups of skilled professionals towards a common goal.
"You're different from what I expected."
David Chen admitted one afternoon as we reviewed project timelines.
"Well, I heard Thomas's computer-obsessed son was taking over. Well..."
He trailed off, looking slightly embarrassed. I laughed, understanding the unspoken concern. "You thought I'd try to revolutionize everything with fancy tech and crash the company even faster?"
"Something like that."
He grinned.
"But you're actually listening to us, learning. Your father would be proud."
Those words meant more to me than he knew. Dad had been showing signs of improvement, but I insisted he focus on his health rather than work. "The company will be here when you're better," I told him. "Right now, you need to rest." During those first 6 months, I approached our problems like I would a complex game scenario. The debt was our final boss, and every small victory was a step toward defeating it. We restructured payment schedules, negotiated with suppliers, and streamlined our operations. I introduced some technology, a simple project management system, digital inventory tracking, but always with input from the team, never forcing changes they weren't comfortable with. The craftsman, initially skeptical of the gamer kid's boss, gradually began to warm up to me. It helped that I never pretended to know more than I did about construction. Instead, I asked questions, listened to their expertise, and focused on removing obstacles that kept them from doing their best work. My grandfather's words, which Dad had often quoted, became my mantra. We are responsible not just for our employees' lives, but for their families' lives too. Care about not just the employees in front of you, but their families behind them. I started keeping photos of our workers' families in my office. When making decisions, I would look at those faces and remind myself what was really at stake. This wasn't a game where you could just reload a save file if you made a mistake. These were real people, real lives. One day, Mike Thompson brought his grandson to the office. The boy was maybe 6, wearing a tool belt that was clearly a toy, but carrying himself with all the seriousness of a master craftsman.
"He wants to be a carpenter like his grandpa,"
Mike explained proudly.
"I told him if he works hard, maybe someday he can work for Miller & Sons too."
That moment hit me hard. This wasn't just about saving my family's company anymore. It was about preserving a legacy that extended far beyond our own family tree. By the 6-month mark, we were making progress. We weren't out of the woods yet. The bleeding had stopped. Our books were starting to show small profits. We managed to negotiate better terms with most of our creditors. Dad, seeing the positive changes, started feeling well enough to want to contribute again.
"I'm feeling better now,"
he insisted one evening when I visited.
"Let me do something. I'm going stir-crazy just sitting here."
I shared our current situation with him, showing the improvements we made. His eyes lit up as he reviewed the numbers, and for the first time in months, I saw that old spark return.
"We're almost there,"
he said excitedly.
"If we could just get that bank loan, we could completely turn things around."
The next day, he went to First Capital Bank, the same institution our family had been doing business with since my grandfather's time. Dad came back with a spring in his step, more energetic than I'd seen him in months. The loan would be the final piece of the puzzle, the key to getting us completely out of the red. But when he returned from the bank later that day, something had changed. The spark was gone from his eyes, replaced by a darkness I'd never seen before.
"I'm sorry, Jimmy,"
he said, his voice barely above a whisper.
"They turned us down."
I tried to reassure him that we'd find another way, that we had approached different banks, but something had broken in him that day. He became withdrawn, spending more and more time in his room. The man who had always kept busy, even during his illness, now barely left his bed. Then, without warning, his health took a dramatic turn for the worst. Within weeks, he was gone. The speed of it all left us reeling. One day he was there, quiet but present, and the next, just empty space and unanswered questions. In his room, we found 2 envelopes, his will and a letter addressed to me. The letter was short, just one sentence. Follow your own path. Be the kind of leader you were meant to be. Reading those words written in my father's steady hand, I broke down for the first time since his passing. All the tears I've been holding back, all the grief I've been trying to process while keeping the company running, it all came pouring out at once. The day of the funeral dawned clear and crisp. Mom insisted on handling the role of chief mourner, saying it would help her stay strong. I stood beside her at the reception desk, greeting the steady stream of people who came to pay their respects. Construction workers, clients, suppliers, each had their story about how Thomas Miller had touched their lives. He gave me my first big contract when no one else would trust a woman contractor, one elderly lady told us, dabbing at her eyes. Said he judged people by their work, not their gender.
Thomas helped me rebuild after the flood of 98.
Another man shared.
Didn't even charge me full price. Said neighbors help neighbors.
Each story was another piece of the puzzle that was my father, showing me sides of him I'd never known. Why hadn't I asked him about these things while he was alive? Why did I let my own interests create such distance between us? The steady floor of mourners was interrupted by the sharp click of expensive shoes on the funeral home's hardwood floor. A slim man in a crisp charcoal suit approached the reception desk, his wire-rimmed glasses catching the light. Something about a smirk sent a chill down my spine before he even opened his mouth.
Well, 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 what do we have here?
The man's voice carried an artificial cheerfulness that felt like fingernails on a chalkboard.
I'm Ted Parker for First Capital Bank. My deepest condolences on your loss. Must have been quite something, huh?
He performed a mockery of a bow, bending at the waist while keeping his head up. His right hand thrust forward for a business card while his left pushed up his glasses. Mom and I exchanged confused glances, but I accepted the card out of ingrained politeness. The name hit me like a punch to the gut. Theodore Parker, First Capital Bank, Oak Branch. Same business card we found on Dad's desk. The banker who had denied his final loan request. Before we could say anything, Parker's artificial cheerfulness twisted into something uglier.
Thomas Miller, huh? Came to us begging for a loan recently, and now he's dead just like that. I guess I was right to reject it. My judgment is never wrong.
Mom's hand found mine under the desk, squeezing tight. Whether she was restraining me or seeking support, I couldn't tell. Maybe both.
I mean, seriously.
Parker continued, his voice dripping with contempt.
What bank in their right mind would lend money to a debt-ridden company with no future? He comes waltzing in, completely clueless, saying stuff like, "Please, if this works out, our company will definitely succeed."
Parker's face twisted into an ugly grin.
And then, get this, a grown man getting down on his knees and begging. I even stepped on his back while he was down there. You should have seen how pathetic he looked, clenching his fist in frustration. Haven't laughed that hard in years. A family construction company talking about success? What a joke!
The image of my proud father on his knees, this smirking banker's foot on his back, sent a surge of rage through me. I lunged forward, but Mom's grip on my hand tightened, holding me back. Parker showed no fear in my movement. Instead, he raised both hands in mock surrender, slowly shaking his head.
What's with this family?
He sneered.
Pathetic father, hot-headed son. Ugh, I'm so scared. This is why blue-collar workers are just a bunch of savages.
If you just came here to cause trouble, then leave. I managed to say through clenched teeth. Don't you have better things to do than hang around at a client's funeral stirring up drama, Mr. Important Banker? Parker's response was to reach into his pocket and scatter coins across the floor. The metallic clinking seemed to echo in the suddenly silent room. 4 dimes and 9 pennies rolled and spun before coming to rest on my feet.
49 cents.
Parker announced with exaggerated ceremony.
That's my condolence money. Here, pick it up, you poor thing.
He stepped closer, invading my personal space, and whispered in my ear.
Like you said, I don't have time to waste. I'm an important First Capital Bank employee, you know. I'm trying to settle things with this. If you get down on your knees and bow to me right here, just like your father did, I might consider giving you a loan. Think you could do it, hotshot? Or is your paper-thin pride too important?
In that moment, something crystallized inside of me. This wasn't just about money anymore. This wasn't even about revenge. This was about dignity. My father's, our employees, and our company's. I leaned in close, matching Parker's whisper. Mr. Parker, are you sure you want to act this way?
Huh? What are you talking about?
His smirk wavered slightly. I mean, toward me, no. Toward this company. Are you sure you want to behave like this? You might regret it. Parker barked out a laugh, but there was a hint of uncertainty in his eyes.
Heh! You're as funny as your old man. As if I regret anything, you idiot.
Is that so? That's your answer then. I understand. I strained up, turned my back on him. Mom, I think it's time for the service to begin. We somehow made it through the funeral, though I barely remember the details. What I do remember is the faces of our employees, the barely contained anger, the clenched fists, the tears that weren't just for my father's passing, but for the indignity they witnessed. When I returned to the office after my bereavement leave, I found an impromptu meeting waiting for me. Mike Thompson, our senior carpenter, was the first to speak.
Who does that stuck-up guy in glasses think he is?
He demanded, his weathered face red of anger.
Coming to a funeral and disrespecting Thomas like that? The man built half this town with his own hands.
David Chen nodded in agreement.
Thomas Miller gave me a chance where nobody else would. It was worth 100 of that banker.
One by one, they shared their stories, not just about Dad, but about their own encounters with banks that looked down on blue-collar workers. Their anger wasn't just for my father. It was for every craftsman who ever been dismissed as poor trash by someone in an expensive suit.
Jimmy,
Mike said, using my first name for the first time since I'd taken over.
what's the plan? Because whatever it is, we're with you.
I looked around the room at these skilled craftsmen, these proud workers who stuck with us through thick and thin. First, I said, we're cutting ties with First Capital Bank. I know we've been with them since Grandpa's time, but loyalty has to go both ways. There were nods of approval around the room. Second, we're going to prove them wrong. Not just Parker, but everyone who's ever looked down on us. We're going to build this company to something so successful that they'll be begging for our business.
For Thomas!
Someone called out.
For Thomas!
The room echoed. Over the next few months, we threw ourselves into our work with renewed determination. Word of Parker's behavior at the funeral spread through the construction community, and something unexpected happened. Other small business owners who'd faced similar treatment from big banks started reaching out to us. Heard what happened at your dad's funeral, one general contractor told me. And the same thing happened to me at First Capital. Got a big project coming up. We're out to work with people who understand what it means to build something with your own hands. One project led to another, then another. Our reputation for quality work, fair prices, and treating people with respect brought in more businesses than we could handle. We had to hire more craftsmen, expand our operations, buy new equipment. Then my phone started buzzing. At first, I ignored the calls from the unknown number, but they kept coming, dozens of them, along with voicemail after voicemail.
Hello, this is Ted Parker for First Capital Bank. Mr. James Miller, how have you been? Would you please consider resuming your business relationship with our bank? We look forward to hearing back from you. Thank you.
Desperation in his voice would have been satisfying if it wasn't so pathetic. I blocked the number and focused on my work. But Parker wasn't done. The next morning, he was waiting outside our office with what appeared to be his supervisor blocking the entrance.
Ah, well, how wonderful to see you.
Parker's voice had that same artificial cheerfulness from the funeral, but now there was an edge of panic to it.
This is Ted Parker for First Capital Bank. Mr. James Miller, isn't it? It's been so long. What an honor to meet you again.
He thrust his hand towards me, but I simply said, "Excuse me," and moved to open the door. First Capital Bank, is it? I asked, my hand still on the door handle. What brings you here unannounced? Parker's supervisor stepped forward, all polished shoes and carefully pressed suit.
As Mr. Parker mentioned in his calls, we'd very much like to review our business relationship with Miller & Sons. We can offer preferential terms in your previous loan request. In fact, we'd be willing to do a significant undercut on standard rates. We were quite surprised when you terminated your relationship with us.
The supervisor continued, looking genuinely puzzled.
Was there a problem? We'd very much like to continue our partnership with an excellent company like yours.
I studied the supervisor's face. He seemed genuinely unaware of what had happened. Well, if they wanted to know, they deserved to hear the whole story. Let me tell you about the last time I saw Mr. Parker, I said quietly. It was at my father's funeral. He threw 49 cents on the ground as condolence money. He mocked my father's memory, bragged about stepping on his back when he asked for a loan, and called us poor trash. The supervisor's face drained of color. He turned to Parker, who had suddenly found his shoes fascinating.
Mr. Parker.
The supervisor's voice was ice cold.
Is this true?
Parker's stammering response was all the confirmation needed. The supervisor turned back to me, genuine regret on his face.
Mr. Miller, I had no idea. Please accept my deepest apologies for our employee's inexcusable behavior. I assure you, he will be dealt with appropriately.
Thank you, I replied. But it's too late for apologies. We found other banking partners who respect what we do, who understand that the value of a company isn't just in its balance sheet, but in its people, its principles, its legacy. I opened the door to our office where the morning sunlight streamed through the windows that overlooked our expanded workshop. The sound of saws and hammers filtered through, the symphony of honest work being done by skilled hands. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a company to run. As I walked into our office, leaving them standing there, I couldn't help but smile. 6 months ago, I would have never imagined myself running a construction company, much less defending its honor against a smug banker. Life really does work in mysterious ways. That weekend, I visited Dad's grave. The autumn sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. I knelt on one knee before the headstone, running my fingers over the engraved letters of his name. And that's how it was, Dad, I said softly, telling him everything that had happened since his passing. The company's growing faster than we can keep up with. We've hired 10 new craftsmen this month alone. Mike's training them in the Miller way. No shortcuts, no compromises, just honest work well done. A warm breeze rustled the flowers Mom had placed there earlier in the week. I wish we could have accomplished this while you were still here. I wanted to see this view together. The breeze strengthened, and for a moment, I could have sworn I heard his voice.
Jimmy, I'm always watching, from the closest place possible.
As I knelt there, I felt a warmth on my right shoulder, as real and solid as any human touch. It felt just like when Dad used to put his hand there. Those rare times when he wanted to show his approval without words. I see. Thanks, Dad. I placed my left hand over that warmth. For a moment, I was a kid again, standing in his workshop, learning that some lessons don't need words to be understood. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in deeper shades of purple and gold. Another quest completed, as my gamer brain couldn't help but think. But this wasn't a game. This was real life, with real stakes and real consequences. I learned that human society is built on trust, just like the houses we build are only as strong as their foundations. Parker had shown us what happens when you abuse that trust through arrogance and cruelty. Once lost, trust is nearly impossible to regain. Standing up, I took one last look at Dad's grave. My quest from here on out was clear. Cherish the teammates who believed in me, to keep growing this company bigger and bigger, making it more stable. To be worthy of the legacy I'd inherited. The evening wind carried the scent of fresh-cut lumber from a nearby construction site. Somewhere out there, our crews were preparing for tomorrow's work. Miller & Sons lived on, stronger than ever. Now, let the second chapter of my story begin.